I'm delighted to have Mr. Gagan Gupta with us today on the Afreximbank TV. So I've been following your story, Gagan, and that of Arise, obviously, for nearly 20 years now. So it's an amazing story. You started off in Gabon, started off as a PPP with AAM, and today you're multi-country, transforming the continent. So your presentation was insightful. And one interesting statistics was comparing Chad and Australia. Maybe you can tell our viewers about the potential of cattle for Chad when compared to Australia.
Arise has, since it started in Gabon, it has now expanded to 14 countries, and we have built multiple integrated industrial platforms. Each industrial platform is focused on specialty of that country, what natural resource that country has. And we looked at Chad. Chad has 126 million livestock. And when you just look at the number of cattle, they have roughly about 32 million cattle. That's almost the same amount of cattle in Australia. Australian meat industry is about $15 billion US. Chad industry is less than $150,000 a year today, because nothing is exported, nothing is processed. Whatever gets exported or processed is by move. So they literally walk into the other countries. So what we did was, in partnership with the government of Chad, it's a public-private partnership where we own 60%, the government of Chad owns 40%. We set up a latest abattoir, a slaughterhouse, and also a feedlot, where now the capacity of that feedlot is 225,000 cattle. So we get the cattle, buy from the farmers, feed them, and then process them. And now this processed meat is getting exported into Cameroon, is getting exported into Republic of Congo, into Gabon, and even Egypt. So it was, just think from these countries' perspective, they were all importing this from other parts of the world where you had next door this possibility. And this is completely transformative, because this will mean that at term, the exports of Chad will be now between $4.7 to $5 billion. So it's a good, important look for African countries to look back as to say how they use their resources to really transform and add value.
And one challenge that I heard as a producer or transformer is securing that supply, really. So you're the off-taker of that cattle, but you have to make sure that the whole value chain coming up to you is secure, regular, precise. So how do you do that, especially with smallholder farmers or cotton farmers in Benin, cattle in Chad, timber in Gabon?
I think you have raised a very important point. How do you ensure you get the raw material at your place? Because when you think of it, when somebody is buying this raw material in India, China, or Vietnam, he just buys the container directly. He does not bother about going to a farmer or going to a farm to collect these products. So when we set up the industrial zones, we actually study the entire value chain to say who is producing, what are the key constraints, and what will ensure that we're able to get this product into our zone. Which means we end up setting up collection centers, we end up setting up model farms, we end up setting up warehouses, and we keep pre-financing. So we end up doing somewhat role what international global traders are doing to take the product outside of the country. We end up doing that role, but to bring the raw material to our industrial zones. And then, very important, because cashew season is only for 3 to 4 months, but the industry will consume it for the entire 12-month period. So then we end up building the warehousing, the storage. So the customer need not buy this inventory and sit with it, but he can buy it when he needs it. So we then build the entire upcountry logistics, giving the advance to the farmers, the storage that ensures the raw material is available all the time.
So what was interesting when I followed your story originally in Gabon, it was Olam, the Singaporean group that grew up in Africa, in Nigeria, was originated in Africa, but you went with the government of Gabon to develop this industrial zone. And but today the model is very different. You still have the government involvement, but you brought in new shareholders. So AFC, I think, one of the original DFIs. Today the Afreximbank through Feder is a shareholder as well. With the Afreximbank, you're also getting financing. So what's the role of the DFIs to expand, build, and also transform your model? Because today I saw in your presentation that it's not just a matter of financing, or you've also got a distribution company and other initiatives that you've developed with the Afreximbank.
I think the development financial institutions like Afreximbank and AFC have played a tremendous important role in where Arise is today. I can clearly say without them, we wouldn't be there where we are today. So between Afrexim and AFC, they have about 80% shareholding in the company. And I think they bring 4 or 5 key things. First, they're able to think at platform level. Because a lot of time the transformation does not happen because you're not trying to just move the needle at a very slow level. And a very practical example. Today, if I were to go to a Nigeria government and say, please stop import of textile, they will say, where is the production? But because you have large institutions like Afreximbank and AFC, you can say, yes, we'll build something which is going to take care of the entire Nigeria need. So I think one thing is they bring the important role of giving the capital. Secondly, they also bring the important role of helping government refine the policy. Because a lot of times, the governments also need to understand what the policy can be. And when somebody like Afrexim talks to them, it brings a very different weight to the entire discussion. The third thing that they bring in is not just financing for us, but for the customers that are coming. So if you now want to put up a caustic soda plant, definitely you have your equity, but you need debt. And that's where Afrexim comes in. I think fourthly, where they come in, very important, is also ensuring that all the outside infrastructure. So you might need a gas supply, you might need a power. So they're able to ensure that these companies also get financing. So the way to look at it is they are feeding in the entire ecosystem. And what Arise has built is, if I may, in some parlance compare, is like an Apple App Store ecosystem, whereby we have created an atmosphere where everybody else can come and play in it, and we ensure that it works all the time. I think massive changes have happened since, we started in Gabon. We have learned so much from our mistakes. It was one country, very different product. We just focused on timber because Gabon had timber. It was 60-40 JV between government of Gabon and AAM then. And we are now a complete different transformative animal from where it was. But, I would again repeat that it would have been possible, but for Afreximbank's support and also leadership of President Orama to be able to think and support this journey. Because a lot of times what will happen is you get people who can think big but cannot break it down to execute and not support it fully.
Fantastic. So that ecosystem approach is extremely important. So you started off in timber. Now today it's in cotton, your cattle, manganese also in Gabon. So is there anything that you won't touch, or you're open to all industries?
So I think what you've said is very right. What we look at is we don't look at it as an industry. Our approach is very ecosystem driven. So as Arise, we look at each country and saying what resource this country has that needs to be transformed. So if this country has cotton, then we need to build an ecosystem around cotton. If this country has cattle, then we need to build an ecosystem around cattle. And then at an Africa level, we look at what are the 4 or 5 key cross-cutting themes. So textile is a big cross-cutting theme because textile import is $48 billion. And also, all these countries produce cotton. So we say, okay, what we can do in cotton in multiple geographies. Then we look at saying, what is the theme around EVs? So what can we do on the EV side? That means you need base metal transformation. And our job is not to invest in the industry. Our job is to create ecosystems where industries come and play in it. So for example, when we build a textile park, other companies like Star Garments in Togo, which is a large lingerie manufacturer, is manufacturing it. Or, Novere is manufacturing it. So what we do is build the ecosystem, attract everybody else to come and play in the ecosystem. So to answer your question straight, today we focus on ecosystems that country needs, and we'll keep adding more ecosystems as we go forward. The next big focus for us is definitely electronics. About $72 billion of electronics are imported. Yeah, and we expect it to go to about $150 billion. So we're focused on how do we build electronic parts where, you're focused on component manufacturing. So where you're getting SMTs, your chip printing happening, not chip manufacturing, but chip printing happening to begin with. So you'll see in next coming 6 to 12 months, we'll see massive focus in Kenya and Nigeria on electronic parks.
Fantastic. And tell me, in terms of from the human capital perspective, has that been one of the constraints? You didn't mention it in your presentation. You mentioned capital, you mentioned political will, ultimately policy, regulatory framework. But what about human capital?
So I think I did mention about human capital, which is trained manpower. But what I've seen personally in the last 15 years, the local talent or the talent in Africa has dramatically changed. You find very good people in the continent who are able to run. So our business in Benin is run by somebody who's from Benin. Our business in Gabon is run somebody who is from Gabon. So in each of the countries that we operate, we have been able to find the talent that can operate these businesses. I think where we lack is very specific industry level knowledge. So when you set up a textile industry, how do you get people who know the textile industry? And that is where what we do is set up vocational training institutes before the industry comes in. So you have trained manpower. But I completely agree with you. A lot needs to be done in terms of ensuring that you're able to train about 30 odd million people in jobs that they will find, not in the jobs that they will not find.
Yeah.
Because I think some of the education system is tailored towards forming people in international marketing, in global commerce, in rather human, but I think they need to be trained, oriented towards what the industry need would be.
Vocational practical training.
Vocational practical training.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Gaga, congratulations.
Thanks.
Thank you.